Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Attachment Theory in Action podcast. Today's episode is actually part one of a two-part series that I have recorded with Jacob Modak. And Jacob is a holistic health practitioner. He was trained by and is part of the Czech Institute, and he is the founder of the Trauma Healed online coaching program. He describes himself as simply someone who has been through their own healing journey and has come through it, and therefore has dedicated himself to helping others do the same. And so, for anyone currently dealing with unresolved trauma or mental health issues, he is here to help. I am very much excited to talk to Jacob. Jacob's actually based in the UK, and he is extremely insightful and knowledgeable, as well as obviously having his own lived experience. Well, hi, Jacob. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for the invite. Really happy to be here. I mean, I love this stuff, and it's always great when you can sit down with a fellow turbo nerd about all this stuff and just have a good old chit chat. But the main point here is to just really dive in and share some stuff that we feel can really help some people. So aside from
Absolutely.
a subtle undertone of silliness, which I think is inescapable on my part, I will be sharing like some things that uh, are very helpful, like that I've used personally and that I've used with other people. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You are very, very welcome. And as the listeners can probably gather, you are a fellow Brit.
I was
Um,
just about to bring it up. Yes, I am. I am a Londoner, born and raised. Yes, I am a fellow Brit. I was about to say the Queen's English, but we don't have her anymore. Rest in peace. We have a king now, so the King's English. Um, yes, but I could flip into Cockney if I needed to.
Yeah,
Potentially.
so listeners might find some quirks happening during this conversation. As I wonder actually if any of my listeners will notice if my accent gets stronger as the conversation goes on as I talk to you.
Don't. I've been in America for a while. Don't judge me. No, no,
That
no.
is
Yeah,
true.
yeah. So, uh, yeah, undertones of irony, sarcasm, self-depreciating humor, just to get the balance between the seriousness and levity, because no healing protocol or process is complete without a good dose of humor.
That
And
is true.
yeah, not I was going to say there's nothing like British humor, but I think every culture could say that about their own. But yes, I do have an affinity for it.
Well, okay, so Jacob, let's dive in. My listeners know that I always start with a very similar question for all of my guests, and our work is a lot to do with our early life experiences, and so, what for you, either in your early life, your early career, has really led you into doing the work that you do today? Tell us some about your story, Jacob.
Well, so like everybody else, I'm just a fellow human being as well. Like before any of the professional aspect of things came along, or just even any kind of understanding of what this stuff actually is, I was just someone that grew up in a very chaotic household and environment. That my the one thing I will say is like I will be talking a lot about how things were, but I'm not still in that. So I'll be reflecting on it, but I just so that people listening who may still be in the kind of mosh pit of it,
Hmm.
um, the place that I'm speaking from now is a very healed one. Like the dynamic with my parents, which is where the dynamic they had with each other and the atmosphere of the household back then, it was a certain way, but that's healed now. Like we've healed as a family. The challenges my father had with alcohol, he's now sober. The challenges that my mum has been having with her childhood, she's working on them. They're both doing coaching with one of my teachers at the Czech Institute. They have been for years now.
Wow.
We've we've consciously talked with each other about how they were brought up suboptimally and how they pass things on, how we're all sorry, how I'm not holding any bitterness. We all cried together. So I will talk about how things were, but I wanted to say that first so that as people are listening, they can understand that I'm speaking about this from the other side of it. So even if
Okay.
you're in there and you think this is impossible, I promise you, I have felt the same thing. But I'm speaking about how things were from the other side of it. So one, I'd like that to inspire hope, and two, um, I wanted to say that first because I'm not bringing things up or speaking about certain moments that were very intense in any way, like I'm pointing fingers
Mhm.
or holding any bitterness. So I just wanted to frame that first.
Okay. No,
Because I,
appreciate that.
um, but so as I was saying, I just grew up in a very chaotic environment. Like my dad was struggling with alcohol, and my parents just did not know how to communicate with each other in a healthy way. So the soundtrack of my kind of childhood was either them screaming at each other or screaming at me for something. Um, but at the same time, I knew that the core of them was love. There's a very big difference between people that have a really good heart and are caught in a bad pattern versus people that are genuinely evil.
Hmm.
Or and that's when you're getting into like the cluster B personality disorder type of things, and that's a different discussion. So, but I'm just going to speak about things how it was for me, so I won't branch off too much, even though we can filter out
I,
into broader
I am
discussion
glad that you
later.
said that though, because that's something I try to make that distinction in a lot of my
Mm-hmm.
podcasts where a person does have lived experience of trauma or of as you call it chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and that you know, unfortunately, yes, there are people out there who are malicious and do things from a
Oh
malicious
yeah,
intent.
yeah,
But more times than not, I love how you put it, that that parents and caregivers have a good heart, but they're trapped in these bad patterns. So,
yeah.
really glad that you said that.
Yeah, it's an important distinction. It's the balance there is that it's not it's a distinction that is for the person. It's not for the it's not for them. It's for the person so that they can not hold on to resentment, but it's not for them in that healthy boundaries are compromised because
Hmm.
suboptimal behavior is suboptimal behavior. It's not acceptable. But at the
Hmm.
same time, understanding that distinction is what allows the person to unburden themselves from bitterness and resentment because you can't move on unless you do that, and you can only let that go if you understand the why.
Hmm.
Because holding on to grudges and bitterness and resentment like that is, as the saying goes, it's like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die.
Mm.
It's not going to work. No, you're going to die. It will deteriorate you. But that will that's a key component that filters into understanding what trauma is, which we will get into later. But I was just someone that was in that and just felt very like the moment where I kind of became aware of this was when I was 14. That was kind of the moment that sort of started for me. And that was kind of the moment where I became self aware. And
Hmm.
what I mean by that is it wasn't so much a choice. It was at a certain point in early teenage years, everyone will have a moment where they're now aware of themselves and the outside world and other people in relation to themselves, which is primarily just a function of a certain stage of neurobiological development. Their brain has got to a certain point where there are certain types of thoughts that they are now physiologically and neurobiologically able to have
Hmm.
and that they weren't able to have before. And that sort of self-consciousness is one of them. Self-consciousness in terms of a deeper understanding of how one feels, not in just a I feel sad right now. Okay, I'm fine now. Now I'm hungry. Okay, now I'm happy. Okay, it's more like it's more like a self-consciousness in an existential sense. Do I feel okay
Hmm.
in relation to the world? So it's a bigger, those bigger existential questions are now able to be had
Hmm.
and thought because of that maturing of the brain. And when that happened for me, a couple of things happened. Like one, I also became uh very aware quickly, and I remember this so vividly. I was in my bedroom. It was literally like I got hit with a lightning bolt. And it was just like, oh, I'm here now. Oh, oh no. I do not feel the way that I want to feel. Oh no, what's going on? And then but then very quickly after that, it kind of became that I felt like there was this other sort of deeper force there that was just sort of pointing me in certain directions. I didn't know what it was at the time. In hindsight now, I know that that was like my deeper wise self, my soul coming online. But at that age, you just don't know. You just kind of feel like your gut is pointing you in certain directions, or you have certain intuitions. And um, as I was kind of looking around me, I was just seeing all of this chaos, and it seems so obvious. Like it's like the house is on fire and no one's talking about it. Like what? Why is everyone just going on as if nothing's going on? This seems so clear to me. And then there was just like a deep, just lack of feeling relaxed because I'm like, something is really wrong here, and
Hmm.
I don't think I chose this. Um, there's an existential and sort of mystical side to that conversation. Like that's more the kind, like if we're talking about nirvana and samsara, nirvana being the sort of mystical, absolute, more heavenly side of it, and then samsara being the reality, the relative side of the street. And that's more like a sort of uh, the those are more Vedic terms. But I'm half Indian as well. I'm half English and half Indian. So my dad's Indian. So like I grew up with Indian culture. So the kind of mystical aspects of India was something I was quite exposed to quite early on.
Which we will talk about where
Mm,
we should mention that this is going to be a two-part episode. So we're probably going to get to that in part two. But
yeah.
before you move on, Jacob, I want to pull out I want us to talk just a little bit more about this experience that you had because when we work with and treat kids and
Hmm.
adolescents, we talk about a couple of things. One is the internal working model, and the other is
Hmm.
this felt safety. And I think that that links to what you're talking about, that up until that age, and for you it was 14 for
Hmm.
whatever reason, that our children often cannot put words to the feeling that they
Yeah.
have.
Hmm. Yeah.
And many of the children that we work with have this, I'm going to really oversimplify it, but this feeling of yuck, like inside, like
Yeah.
something's not right with me, something's not right with the world. This isn't,
Yeah.
something is wrong here. And, because
Hmm.
they don't have the words to put to it, it's or the intellectual capacity to understand it and process it, it's
Yeah.
something's wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of where our inner working model goes, like
Yeah.
something's wrong with me.
And that was my experience as well. But the the thing that kind of exacerbated that a lot was when I started seeing certain patterns. Like I'm like, it doesn't seem right that they're talking to each other like that, and the energy feels really off here. And I'm like 15 and in going on 16 and stuff, and I'm starting to bring this up. The response I got was as if I had three heads, and it was not received very well, and to say the least. Um, uh, and what that caused was a deep, deep confusion because I started questioning my own sanity because I was like, I feel like this is what's going on, and I feel like I'm right, but they're older than me. does that mean that they're right and I'm wrong because I'm young and I'm not sure? And so it's and they're just sort of I'm just bringing this up, and it's just almost like they're just like they're looking at me like I'm an alien. And it's almost they're looking at me and talking to me as if they're just tolerating the fact that I'm here
Mm.
because they're just not understanding what I'm saying or who I am, or I just do not feel understood in any way at this moment in time. And so I was just so confused to the point of being genuinely distraught, and it got to the point where I lost count of how many times I just could not understand what was going on. That all I could do was sit in my room, turn the lights off, hug my knees and cry, and just look up at the ceiling and say, why me?
Mm.
And there again, there's a lot of sort of there are a lot of mystical answers to those questions, but just for to stay in this in the experience of that moment, that went on for a long time, and that just fuel of and need to just know why, that was the driving force that pushed me into this. I felt like, well, I can't leave here, and I only have two options. I do nothing and just get crushed by this, or I understand it so much that I'm so far beyond it that it doesn't even affect me. The way that if a child has a tantrum, it's not really good. The adult's not really going to be traumatized by it because they understand what's going on so much that they're just like, okay,
Mm.
okay, whatever. So that was the thing. That was the thought process at 14 years old for me. And I also,
That's very impressive at 14 to have that kind of level of awareness.
well, it may, maybe for me, for me, it just felt like um, it felt like the only log in the ocean I could cling to that helped me feel like I wasn't drowning. Um, and so there that, but the thing is that because it was so unrelenting, how much of this sort of stuff was there. There was like I didn't really like my sort of energetic experience of childhood wasn't childhood. Every second of my existence was I just feel like energetically I've been poisoned, and I'm trying to get this out, and I need to understand what's going on, and I have no idea what's going on. And
Hmm.
so I was just constantly journaling, reading, listening, studying, in the mosh pit with them, crying, trying to figure stuff out, this, that. There were some periods throughout my teenage years that did give some brief moments of respite, but in general, that was the experience. And also, when I was 16, I started doing martial arts. Like, that's my background as well, like Thai boxing in particular. Um, and with quite a traditional teacher. And Thai boxing is the national sport of Thailand, and Thailand is a Buddhist country. So a lot of Buddhism and Buddhist tradition is interwoven Thai into Thai boxing culture. So I got exposed to the sort of meditative aspects of Buddhism as well
Mm.
through my coach, and my coach was very much a sort of strong, healthy male role model for me at an age when I needed one. Um, and it also was very important for me because I've naturally got a lot of fire in me. But it's not the kind of fire that's very boisterous. I kind of call it like quiet fire. Like
Hmm.
when I speak in my temperament, I'm quite soft spoken and gentle, but I'm super driven.
Hmm.
Um, and just very like intentional with my time and what I would like to do and things like that. So I'm not like loud and boisterous, but the result of that temperament and all of that going on was it manufactured like a lot of anger, and just combine that with just being a teenage boy and the amount of testosterone that you got, you need some kind of healthy outlet to actually just keep your physiology somewhat calm, and also teach you a living philosophy to engage with uh these more aggressive emotions and things like that. um, and give you sort of like a real code of honor to um, uh, live within, so that as your process, and it was very, very lucky that I found that at that time and did it all throughout my teenage years, because that stopped me from going off the rails. Like I would feel the
Hmm.
intensity of all of this, but it didn't I was going to say degenerate, but that's got a slightly negative connotation, and I don't want this to sound like I'm judging or shaming anybody. It didn't manifest
Hmm.
in certain behaviors that were self-destructive in sort of like a very rapid way, like typical ones, drugs or violence or things like that. Like I did have something to channel myself into. So when a lot of the intensity would be there, I would sort of just sit in it, like I was just sitting in, like just sitting there as if I was set on fire, and just sort of handling
Hmm.
it burn me and just try and figure it out, as opposed to trying to avoid it so much. And I think that was because of um, uh, that, and just what my coach had taught me from an early age. Like you're taught to, you have a challenge, like don't run from it, like be
Hmm.
brave and face it. And if you can always ask for help. But he being very traditional and also deeply developed and spiritual man as well, he taught us all about our soul very early on too, and that deep inner strength that you can call upon. And he had a similar kind of childhood too, so he really understood what I was dealing with. Um, and so that kind of moral foundation framework that is, it's not even in my mind, it's just woven into the fabric of who I am.
Hmm.
I say woven, maybe more like bashed, but benevolently bashed. But it it built the foundation from which I engage with everything, and also uh, the moral of, as you learn these things, make sure that your actions are aligned in a way where they support the health and prosperity of other people as well. Um, there were lots of things that I had to learn that I could only learn later in life. Like I'm 33 now, and there were certain things as during teenage years that I wouldn't have been able to learn them then. Like there are just certain things that you can't learn at certain times. Um, but that really helped, and um, stopped me going off the rails. But if I didn't have stuff like that, and I didn't kind of have that inclination, I can easily see how I could have just deteriorated, because that
Hmm.
experience of how I was engaged with, uh there were things that were said by uh my parents, and also I'll put my hand up, things like ways that I engaged with them, where at certain ages, being younger, not saying that I should have known at that time, because it's hard to know this at when you're young, but there were certain times when I couldn't understand how, or have compassion for, the fact that they were children once too, and they
Hmm.
had a really suboptimal childhood as well. That's a very hard thought to have for a child, though, when you're a
Well,
teenager.
it's also
That
very,
came when
very
I was
hard for an
19.
adult.
That came when I was 19. That moment, I remember that was a turning point. And that was after listening to Paul Chek speak. Um, Paul Chek is the founder of the Chek Institute. It's the institute I'm part of and training with. He's one of the most important pillars of holistic wisdom in the last few decades. He's one of the foundational practitioners that really merged East and West in terms of traditions together, and set the foundation from which practitioners of my generation and just the one before me can do our work from. So he's beyond important, and one of the many things that he said was that. And when I heard it, again hit me like a lightning bolt. And that was such a profound moment at 19 when I was getting yelled at again. And it just clicked. Oh, they're not actually yelling at me. They're yelling at their parents and pointing their mouth at me.
Mm.
And they were a kid once too. And I can have compassion and love for that kid. That was the start of releasing the resentment. Not saying that was easy, and there's still moments where that little boy in me sometimes just still feels that, like, oh, what could you do that? And it's like all right, just all right, breathe. But as time goes on, the deeper you get, the less and less. Like, that's very, very infrequent that comes up. But I'm still human, so it still can in moments. But that was a real profound moment. But that only came after years of just deep distress, because I felt like it was all my fault, because like how they were interacting with me, they they were projecting their stuff onto each other and then projecting things onto me, and just not getting to the root of it. And it just seemed like I felt like it was my fault that all of everything was screwed up. And
Hmm.
the way that they uh would speak to me in certain moments, when in hindsight those were the moments when, like, they would get triggered, a defensive state would come up, as Dr. Keith Witt describes defensive states being uh states where people have reduced or numbed empathy and emotions, and the kind of and we just stop seeing the human in front of us, and we just see a projection of what we think can hurt us, and we try and annihilate it. And that was a big thing with my mum, in terms of um uh she would sometimes she would get in these states, and then her words would just become vicious. And
Hmm.
the things that she would say were just deeply distressing to hear. And I don't need to repeat them because I'm not living in the past, and that's not the point of this. um and uh Obviously, like, people can be, I can be very specific but about certain moments, but I don't think it's necessary. I think it's enough to say that those moments happened. And but hearing them at those ages before I was 20, um like, you just can't help but feel like, oh, I'm the problem. And then as a result, you just don't grow up with a solid self-esteem, and it's something
Hmm.
that you feel like you have to construct it yourself. But then when you learn how to connect with your soul, you realize that it's never gone anywhere, it's only been covered. But that's the technical bit for a bit later. But
Yeah,
yeah, but
I
that
get.
ickiness that you were talking about, that it's
Mhm.
my fault, that the yuck, I'm gross, this, that I've experienced that as well. And a lot of the times it comes from how the response that we have had from other people. And me, and the other aspect to that um was me starting to sort of shine out the sort of depth and truth to my spiritual self at that age, quite early on. That was the response. And so unconsciously, the unconscious um story that little boy felt, that kept playing in the background for a long time, was, it's not safe for you to show the world who you are in your
Mhm.
full spiritual depth, so you have to hide it. And um to get a bit more sort of woo woo for people, couple that with a Chiron in Leo in a birth chart, which is what I have, which is the wound of visibility. You kind of get a double whammy of, like, oh, I can never show anybody who I am. I have to just hide forever. And then when you
Mhm.
have an aspect to yourself that wants to show up in the world and speak, because you know that you have something to share, you just feel like your truth wants to get out, but your ego's shutting it down. So you just feel constricted, and that leads to stress, and then that turns into dysregulated hormones and chronic fatigue, and then you just get a whole cascade of internal chaos as a result from the external that you've just been bathing in rather
Mhm.
unpleasantly for so many years. Um, so yeah, that I but for anyone who's listening to this, or anyone who has experienced that as well, like I really understand it. And a lot of the times, um, people that come into these kinds of containers, a lot of them are like a lot of us have such a powerful light to shine, but a lot of the times the people that are around that light can't handle it and don't
Mhm.
even understand it. And so it's not even like they're trying to squash it. They just don't understand it. And people are usually not even scared. They're usually just shunning of things that they don't understand. But couple that with a young mind that's still trying to understand itself just on a neurobiological level and on an egoic development level, the translation of that is, oh well, they're older, so and I'm younger. Well, I can't show anybody because it's not like it's not nice. It's like it's dangerous. Like
Mhm.
they're like this just isn't safe. So and then you get into like trust issues and things like that, which leads us into attachment styles pretty
Well,
well.
so
So
we can talk about that in a minute. I want to pull up something that you mentioned in our pre-conversation because it's
mhm,
this is really what you're talking about, that you made this statement which I think is very powerful. The unconscious relationship my mom had with me because I'm a man. I think that that plays into this as well, that you know, and the comment you made about, they're really yelling at their caregivers, but it's coming out of their mouth aimed at towards me, you know.
yeah,
So I think there's two pieces there. There's the parental piece, but there's also the spouse piece as
yeah.
well of the adult. Tell us a bit more about that.
So one of the things with that, and this is this is a bit more specifically about like the relationship between a son and a mother, and if that's suboptimal, what can kind of happen in the man as a result. So um before I even kind of get to that, one of the things that is just understood is the inherent difference in the experience of the word safety, but for a woman in the world and a man. So I've understanding the nuances of that way more now. I really can have compassion for the experiences that she had when she was growing up, which was suboptimal, and I don't even know the full experiences she just had out in the world with men. She was born in um like the very late 50s, and then so uh being a teenager in like the 70s and then young adult in the 80s and etc. When the internet wasn't even there, so people didn't even have as much exposure, and society just in general wasn't talking about this. So I was born in 93, so I don't know what men were generally like, and we even forget in how soon, well soon, how recent in terms of the grand scheme of history, or like two world wars were.
Hmm.
Like that stuff gets passed down. Like my parents were brought up by the people by the children of the people who survived World War II,
Hmm.
and they were brought up by the people who survived World War One.
Hmm.
So my so generally her experience with men was they're dangerous and they're everywhere, which to my understanding, which is again like um this is a global more global conversation of which I have a lot to say, but currently a lot of women's general experience in the world is men are dangerous, and they're everywhere. so I'm generally not really feeling safe. And um, couple that with her experience with my dad when he was in that phase of his journey, um, I can really understand how, even though she was seeing even though she was seeing me as the son, I can really understand how, like, when I became a teenager and started Thai boxing unconsciously, instead of looking down at like little cute Jacob, she's now like looking at this dude who's spending
Hmm.
most of his days learning how to smash things with his
Hmm.
limbs. And he's also in a bit of a bad mood because there's
Right.
chaos all around and he's just not vibing with it.
Hmm.
But at the same, and so, but the response was as if I could do something, but even though, like, in my internal moral structure, there is no scenario where that would ever happen. But whether her unconscious understands that or not is another question.
Hmm.
Um, so that would come up in sort of defensive states. But in between that, when there were moments where it felt like we were vibing well, the dynamic was not. It didn't feel like mother to son and in the sort of typical way. And I only understood this after I read The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. And like, I sent you that Instagram post I made, which I'm getting onto, so I'll get into that. But what quite one of the things that can happen if men have a mother wound is that wound can become unconscious and it can eroticize. And what that means is they can find themselves in, and this also relates to an avoidant attachment style, but they can find themselves caught in the wound of searching for the ideal woman of perfection in a romantic context. But what that actually is the little boy in them trying to search for mother's love, because men who have that typically came from mothers who weren't emotionally there for them and expected them to give her the attention that she wasn't get that they weren't getting from their husbands. And I remember, I can't remember the year or how old I was exactly, but I remember that the times where we were vibing was when we were kind of talking back and forth. But in hindsight now, that was the kind of banter that you would have like with a friend, or if
Hmm.
you're on an equal level, where the man's kind of being playful and flowing his energy into her.
Hmm.
But I didn't grow up feeling like the like female attention and energy was flowing into me. And I remember when I was when she wanted to talk, because she would talk to me about him and he
Hmm.
would talk to me about her without them there. And that was really unpleasant as well, because they would bitch to me about each other, which was just like, ugh.
Hmm.
Like, because I want them to get along. They're my parents. And then they're talking to me about each other without the other person being there and slagging them off and just complaining about them. And it was just, it just wasn't very nice. And you just feel like you're caught in the middle of something. And I remember when she was trying to sort of vent emotionally, and I was like, I don't want to hear this. And then
Hmm.
she sort of started getting emotional. I was like, well, who do I have to talk to then?
Hmm.
And in my head, I'm like, this isn't my job. Like, this is not how it should be. And so, which again, I am compassionate for. Like, I can't understand the sort of intensity of challenge, because they were going through all of this. They were still trying to raise me and my sister, and my dad was trying to build his business, and there was like they had the house and the mortgage and all the rest of it. The amount of extra stuff they were having to deal with too, and just trying to do the best they could with the tools that they had at the time. I have a lot of compassion for. I really do. Um, and I can understand this more and more like the older I get. Um, but
Can I pull out a couple of things too? Like,
yeah, yeah, please go
so
on.
um because this reiterates something that you mentioned earlier too, that and you said, and we say this on the podcast a lot, that people are doing the best they can with what they have, right? And so,
Mm,
but and I want to say but and it is important though for us and for professionals out there to recognize, and for parents out there to recognize that one thing that you mentioned in our pre-chat, and this you've been alluding to this, but I want to use this terminology. You said about the maternal energy wasn't flowing into me.
hmm
And I think that professionals out there who are working with parents to be, people who are thinking about having children have to help them understand that part of that parental responsibility is that that energy is flowing into the child, that we aren't taking from the child. We aren't trying to get our needs met from the child, that the child's inner system has to feel that there is truly this sense of uh, emotional and physical safety, but this emotional safety that I've got you kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have me and I have you, and I can hold both of us.
I definitely am 100%. Just a couple of things on that. Like one, that understanding again is for the person so that they can unburden themselves from any resentment, but hold a healthy boundary as well,
Hmm.
which is what you said. So it's both at the same time. And uh the experience growing up too, which also relates back to how like me fundamentally knowing that the core of both of them is love, is that I definitely felt that in moments. I felt that when I was sick or when I was injured. And I was injured quite a lot. Although that was just more because I did a lot of sports and climbing trees and stuff. I didn't actually do it to try and feel that from them. But like when
Right.
I broke my leg and needed surgery and stuff, like all their bullshit went away, and for the that amount of immediate time, I was like, oh my god, there's my parents. And so the the thing is, like, I knew even in spite of all of this, if I were, and this is one of the reasons why um uh I I never dissolved the relationship, because like deep within me I knew that no matter what, they loved me unconditionally. There's just all of this stuff that still needs to be dealt with and can't be just dismissed. But I knew fundamentally, if I was halfway up the country, it's the middle of the night and I broke my leg and I'm screwed, I could call them and they'll drive
Hmm.
however long and come get me. Because that is the core of them. There's just other stuff that needs to be dealt with. That also makes it very confusing.
Yeah,
Um,
because the emotional capacity wasn't, that was really the piece I feel you're saying is what was
mm,
missing. It was the emotional responsiveness, I can, and I think, and I'm not saying this in any way to compare
mhm,
situations, but I think we hear of that similar experience in orphanage settings, for example, where all
mhm.
of the physical needs, all of those, if they hurt themselves, they're taken care of. You have food, you have a roof over your
Yeah,
head, but an element of the emotional responsiveness is missing.
yeah. But now we're getting into the generational aspects of things, because my grandmother, my mum's mum, grew up in a Catholic orphanage. She was dropped off, and there's two sides to generational patterns. There's the mystical side, and then there's the sort of developmental,
Hmm.
more tangible behavioral side. Both are true. But to talk more on the behavioral side, like my mum's mum, my grandmother, who's passed on now, a few years ago, she grew up in a Catholic orphanage. Her dad just dumped her there when she was 3, and that's where she grew up. And she raised my mum. So my mum, so she didn't really know how to share that because she didn't get it. So my mum didn't really get
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
So my mum didn't really know how to do that either. And so again, that understanding is for the person, whilst also setting a healthy boundary. But you unburden yourself from resentment, but you also that also allows you the compassion to keep your heart open to what they went through as well, which is and as Paul Chek describes it, the balance is loving from a safe distance. You need to know what
Hmm.
your safe distance is. uh is it can you handle being in the same physical proximity to them? No, okay. Can you handle a phone call maybe once a month or something? No, okay. Can it just be text? Even if that's no, is it just you hold them in love in your heart as you go on
Hmm.
your path? Whatever is your safe distance, know that, but always keep your heart open. That's a core teaching, and it's something that's fundamental to the healing process. But that's the balance between the two. Your heart never closes, but you know what your safe distance is, and it can change. You may need X amount of time at one, but then you feel like actually I want to start. Maybe once a year I'll meet them in person, or whatever. That's for the individual to decide for themselves. But the main thing is, what distance do you need to make sure that your heart stays open to them and the situation? And that's the balance between the two. Um, but yes, but all physical needs met and the emotional thing is there. And like people that grow up in very affluent families can feel that too. Like they have all the money in the world, but the parents work
Hmm.
all the time and they're not there. And so emotionally they feel poor. Whereas people who financially that are poor, but they truly love their families and dance with each other all the time, feel emotionally rich. Like, and one of the drivers of this work is let's have humanity have both. So let's not do this one or the other stuff anymore. We've had enough of that. Let's do a bit better, but we need to bring this stuff up and talk about it, which is what we're doing for that to actually happen. But yes, um, and that feeling of properly being uh seen and heard and held and understood, like that's fundamental for every child. And sometimes the parent is just there's just so much psychodynamic noise in them because of what they're going through. They want to, but they just emotionally they just don't have it to share, or they
Hmm.
just don't know how because the child is just happens to be expressing themselves and a personality they just don't understand.
Hmm.
And so that can be a factor too. Like personality wise, it's my mum and my sister are a lot more similar, and also that aspect of my sister being a woman, my mum was just all more at ease just being around her
Hmm.
as well. Um, because I'm also quite opinionated, but I don't try and bash people over the head with my opinions. But I'll state things with conviction, but I never try and deny someone their opinion, even though like I can sound in my tone and conviction very forceful. I never use that to try and bludgeon them out of their freedom to have their opinion. But sometimes I can express myself like that. And the response from my mum would be she would feel like her interpretation of that tone or sort of emotional um honestly just enthusiasm and passion for the subject would be like, oh no, danger, defensive state, now she's not listening, and now I'm an object.
Hmm.
And 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 so I sometimes I couldn't have a conversation and I couldn't connect. And there were some and I remember sometimes when I was older, like in my 20s, like sometimes I would take a step forward. Like we would be talking and I'm trying to work through something with her, and I'd take a step forward closer to her and she'd take a step back away from me. And in my head, it's like, I would never do anything to you, but
Hmm.
you're treating me as if I'm dangerous.
Hmm.
And that was very and like and it's like, well, I can't connect with you. And that was very and there's a want there as well. But the balance is like I can't like neuter my energy or not be me, and because like me, like I'm a very passionate person, and like I've got quite an intensity to my energy, but I never it like the intention is never to have someone dim theirs. The intensity is like an invitation for other people to flare up too in whatever way they want to. Like I never do it to try and squash people. But
Hmm.
um
But
there were
that was
just
her interpretation of it based on her
I'm not going to
experiences.
say what her interpretation was because I don't know 100%, and I'm not going to put words in her mouth or speak for her. But there was a response that blocked full connection,
Hmm.
which made it difficult. But we have talked about the we have talked about this as well. Um, but again, like after a lot of work and bringing things up, but that was it. It just left that little boy in me just feeling like there was a certain amount of uh just love and worth that just was that I had to just find within myself afterwards, which you can find, but it's through deep connection with your soul. Whereas a lot of people, if there's enough of just mother's love flowing into the young man and the little boy initially, his sort of love reservoir is inner love
Hmm.
is like it's there. It's already there. It's full, and only mother's love can do that. And going back into how this can manifest into that eroticized wound is what that kind of man who has the ideal woman of perfection and can't settle on one. What that actually is the little boy trying to find mother's love unconsciously, but because no one can replace mother's love, that's why he feels like there's always something wrong. It's like just not quite right. Maybe the
Hmm.
next one,
Hmm.
maybe the next one, maybe the next one. It's never going to work. That is this. Um, that's another form of addictive behavior, trying to use an external modality to satiate an interior issue, an
Hmm.
intangible interior issue. The only way to address that is for him to deepen his own connection to his own soul, which is an acronym, which we'll talk about later. Um,
So that's actually, I think that's a really good place for us to pause for episode one, because you've given us a really good
okay.
foundation of your journey up to this point. And I would love for our listeners to join for episode two and really focus. Our conversation can really talk about the your healing journey,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
and
Okay.
the work that's been done.
We'll get into the
Um,
technical aspects and stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Go,
I would
go,
love
go,
that.
turbo nerd.
So we will pick up in episode two, and we hope that you all join us for that.
Yeah, cool.